I have a problem. You have a problem. We all have a common problem, and that problem is I can't stop building up dope frame sets. Yo, welcome back to the channel, boys and girls. In today's video, we are taking a look at the latest or the current Scott Foil RC Pro. Bro, look how dope this frame set looks. Look how aerial it looks. This thing looks off the chain. So in this video, we're going to be going over briefly just some of the details and specs on the Scott Foil RC Pro. Of course, we're going to get this bad boy weighed out. I'm going to talk about some of my plans for this build in the coming fall. And I'm also going to tell you who this frame set used to belong to if I haven't already given it away in the title description on this video. And huge shout out to Psycho Limited for hooking me up with this frame set. They have been fantastic to work with over the last few months or so. And I should have a code somewhere or a link down below where you can save like $75 off of your purchase from Psycho Limited. So without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so as you guys can see, this is the Scott Foil RC Pro. Over this last year or two, I have gotten just a handful of requests from you guys, the viewers, of frame sets that you wanted me to feature and review. One of those being the Tarmac SL8, which I have done. I own that bike for over a year. I've ridden it, I've raced it, I've climbed with it, and it was a fantastic bike. But now that bike is long gone. And another very highly requested frame set that you guys have requested for me has been this one right here, the Scott Foil RC Pro. And just a quick side note before we continue, even though my channel did start off where I was just featuring exclusively Chinese brands, that was never really my intentions moving forward. I always wanted to have a space for both myself as well as you guys, the viewers, for me to be able to feature and review a variety of products across different demographics as well as different countries of origin. So I'm just happy that my channel is finally to a point where we get to see some of these more higher end, or in this case, flagship level frame sets, because it's really exciting and it'll really help add some context to really what these bikes are like to ride with on a day-to-day basis. So Scott Foil RC Pro, as you guys can see, it is unapologetically aero. There's nothing climber about this bike. And there was a point where some of the world or the continental teams were riding this bike. I think now they have moved over to the Scott Addict, but there was a point in time that this was the race bike to have. And here where I live in Chicago, where it's pancake flat, this bike, or this frame set I should say, should make a lot of sense. So this is a size 56. It came already installed with the derailleur hangers, even the extra one out back, just to kind of make it easier to remove that rear wheel. We have a BB86 press fit bottom bracket design. Just look how chunky the bottom bracket area is overall. I already know that this is going to be a very stiff, probably unforgiving ride because this is a race aero crit monster, but just the overall look of this bike, guys, I'm going to keep saying this in this video. You can clearly see that I'm really excited to have this frame set, but everything about the way this bike is designed, or this frame set, is all about aerodynamics and not being a noodle. Psycho Limited is your one-stop shop for new and pre-owned bikes, frames, wheels, and components. They are based in South Florida and are a family-owned operation that has really streamlined the buying and selling process, making it as straightforward and convenient as possible. One of the great things about Psycho Limited is they work directly with brand manufacturers to offer very competitive prices on new equipment. All of their inventory ships directly from the warehouse, so you don't have to wait for the individual sellers to package their bikes, ship to Psycho Limited, have Psycho Limited's professional mechanics inspect the bikes, and then send the bike to you, which could easily be a 2 to 3 week turnaround. Just like with my Ventum NS1, which was a lovely bike by the way, my Scott Foil frame set was packaged exceptionally well and arrived here in Chicago in about 3 business days. So be sure to check out their website, and I do have a $75 off code which can be used on orders of $500 or more. Now back to the video. Quick story time before we weigh out this Scott Foil frame set. So over 20 years ago, I was in college at the time. I had randomly stumbled upon Count Basie and his work. And fast forward, I have come to really appreciate his music. In fact, he's one of my favorite jazz musicians of all time. And during this time, I was living with my father because my parents had recently got a divorce. One day I come home from school and I noticed there was over 3,000 vinyl records sitting on the curb waiting to be picked up by the garbage man the next day. So I go inside, I run to my dad and I tell him and I ask him, hey, why are you throwing away all of this vinyl records? And he told me it's because he didn't have space, because now that my parents were divorced, he was retiring and he was going to be moving back to Belize, and he just didn't have space to carry 3,000 records. So I told him, I will take over the vinyl collection. I will keep it forever. I will never sell them. And so this is how I've come to have over 3,000 vinyl records. But the interesting note about why this particular LP is so important to me is due to the fact that even though I've been a big fan of Count Basie over the years, I had no idea that my father was also a big fan of Count Basie. I spent many, many years combing through all the different records and vinyls, LPs that my parents had to get some insight of what they were like when they were my age. And so all along, my dad was also a huge fan of Count Basie as well. I had no idea. So anyway, let's go ahead and weigh out this Scott Foil RC Pro in a size 56. We have both of the derailleur hangers also installed, a couple of bottle cage bolts. So we have 1,014 grams for a size 56. Obviously, this being a super duper aero frame set, it isn't going to be the lightest frame set I've ever featured on this channel, but that is pretty solid given how aero this frame set is. Next up, we have the cut fork, super aero as well. We have 488 grams. And then finally, for the two-piece seat posts, we have, that's pretty good actually, 1,040 grams. So let's continue. The fit and finish on this frame is fantastic. Something that you should probably expect, given that this bike brand new as a whole entire bike is probably like $10,000. Insane amount of money. But nonetheless, they've done a really good job. So you have basically the skid plate in case you drop your chain, which is really nice. You have these nice looking grommets for the cables and for the Di2 cable as well. And then should you want to run Di2, this battery compartment underneath, it pops out, and then there's like a little sort of plastic design where the Di2 cable can kind of snug in and stay nice and secure. And then you just plug in the cables. So this is a nice design to have, because rather than having to secure the battery into the seat post, which obviously you can't do given this two-piece design, you don't have to worry about having to fish that cable through here. And basically you just have the cables go for the rear derailleur and the front derailleur, and everything is in one place as opposed to having it be through that seat post design. I also want to just highlight, just look how much carbon fiber is here right in this area. So this, I imagine, is probably one of the reasons why people have said how stiff and potentially punishing this frame set could be, because I imagine this area right here is really stiff. But the upside to this means is you should get really good power transfer from the bottom bracket area to propel yourself forward. And then moving to the front of the bike, again, guys, look at this paint job. Just look at the sparkles in this paint job. This thing looks fantastic, and it's gonna look awesome in the sunlight. But look how incredibly wide this area here is in the head tube. Now, this is one of the updates. I believe it's with the updated UCI rules where they were able to have a deeper head tube. So this Scott Foil RC Pro does take advantage of that rule change, which means you get a much deeper head tube for aerodynamics. Now, of course, this probably means that this isn't going to be the best frame for the crosswinds, but nonetheless, where I live at, I'll take aerodynamics over crosswind stability any day of the week. The carbon seat post uses this two-piece design, and I believe this rubber grommet part that you see near the top, it allows you to use a variety of Scott's proprietary components, like a radar light out back. This frame set did not come with that radar light, but if I wanted to purchase one later, it would be no problem. One other thing that I do want to note too is that this seat post uses a 0mm offset seat post. Now for myself, I tend to prefer a 15mm offset seat post, but this should still work okay because I have been moving my saddle forward in my latest bike fit. So it shouldn't be a problem, but just kind of keep that in mind where you could potentially struggle with your seat post fore and aft because this is a 0 versus a 15mm offset seat post. But with that being said, just the overall geometry of this bike, it really is intended to have that saddle to be forward, which is why they have a 0mm offset seat post. And if you were to look at the geometry chart, particularly the seat tube angle, It's much higher up. I should say it's not slack at all. It very much is almost that, resembling a TT bike. So Scott designed this frame set to really have the rider be pretty much directly over the bottom bracket area, which is a bike fit decision that a lot of riders have been going to, including myself. So just keep that in mind, that this bike is really designed for aerodynamics, for speed, for stiffness, and to really have that rider be optimized over that bottom bracket area, whether it's just for aerodynamics or just for overall rider efficiency. One of the main annoyances I have with these higher end brands is they tend to use proprietary designs, meaning you are stuck using their ecosystem when it comes to components, things like that. So on the left is a traditional width steer tube. It was from a Windspace SOC3, and the width on this steer tube, I believe it's like 1¼ inch, versus on the right is from Scott. This is again the RC Pro foil, and the width on this is only 1 inch. So what that means is you really can't use third-party cockpits on the Scott foil because the steer tube is too narrow. So what that means is you basically have to exclusively use handlebars and cockpits from Scott. And on this particular frame set, the steer tube was basically intended to be slammed. So there's not even any wiggle room to even use spacers at all. And their integrated cockpits, especially for the dimensions that I needed for, they are extremely hard to come by. But thankfully on Scott's website, they do sell separate stem combos where you can run their stem and then run your own handlebar design, as long as it can integrate the cables internally. So I do have a 130mm length stem from Scott coming that is designed specifically for the Scott Foil RC Pro. And even just further emphasizing that point of using a proprietary design. So even just looking at the bearings. So the one on the right here, this one is the one that goes over the crown race on the bottom of the fork. And then this one is the one that goes up top, where you would run this setup here as far as the handlebar. So even just what was supplied to me from Psycho Limited, this bike has to be ran with a slam stem or a slammed cockpit. There's no room for spacers at all. But beyond that, it's a pretty straightforward process. You basically just install the bearings, top and bottom, install the fork, and then since it's already cut, I don't have to do any extra measuring. And then this is right here is where that stem would be installed. So pretty straightforward. This is just the pretty typical wedge for the C-post. And then this is the top cap that you put over the expander plug. And then once that's installed and the stem is installed, this plastic cover just goes right on top of it. Next up, I want to talk about some of the plans I have for this build. So a little while ago, I had put on my Instagram story this exact frame set, and I asked you guys, the viewers, on which group set I should go with. So at this point, you guys know I am a huge fanboy of Shimano 12-speed Di2, particularly the Ultegra Endura Ace level of group sets. I like those because the shifting is flawless, the modularity on the braking is fantastic, and I've never had a drop chain on the front chain ring. So that's why I've always used that as my tried and true setup for all of my fast group rides and the handful of races I've done this year. However, I also have the brand new SRAM Force E1 group set as well with the new lever design. So I could put that on here as well. The only problem is I'd have to kind of figure out the bottom bracket situation because I would need a dub for BB86 bottom bracket. But let me know in the comments down below which group set you think I should do. Should I go with the Shimano Di2 12-speed, or should I go with the latest SRAM Force E1 group set? And the last thing I want to discuss really briefly is this frame may look familiar to you if you've been following some of the other YouTubers in this particular space, particularly those that crit race. This bike used to belong to, that's right guys, this used to belong to Jeff Linder, aka NorCal Cycling. This was his dedicated crit bike at least 1 to 2 years ago. I don't think that this frame set has been clapped out despite the fact that he's raced on it. I haven't seen any footage of him crashing on this bike. And of course, had he had crashed on this bike, then there would really not be a reason for him to be sending this bike over to Psycho Limited for resale. But it is funny to see how basically we are now Eskimo Brothers, or I'm basically getting his sloppy seconds. But hey, if this frame set was good enough for him to race on, then certainly it will be more than enough for myself. But nonetheless, this is a used frame set. This is on loaner. I'll have this at least throughout the fall, but I'm just really excited to get this bike built up, guys, because I have no doubt that it's going to live up to all of the expectations that I have read and seen on this bike. I expect it to be very fast. I expect it to be very stiff, and I expect it to be all out race, go, go, go. So I'm gonna leave the video at that, guys. Stay tuned later as I will eventually get this frame set built up, just because I do have to wait for one of the proprietary stems to arrive, which I can discuss later in that video. But huge thank you to Cycle Limited again for sending me out this frame set. Questions, comments, and concerns, please feel free to leave them down below, and I'm gonna check you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.